I got to say, this is a topic that I've really wanted to talk about with my next guest. I can't tell you how many robotics and, AI automation solutions we've been looking at. Many of you know, when I moved to Cartersville, I have a little bit of land. Okay. I have acres now versus that little postage stamp where I came from. And I have started my journey into gardening. And let me tell you, it is very challenging to get everything timed just right. We've even thought about, should we put a little greenhouse on the property? All these little things. However, when we look ahead into the future of food, you have to be thinking there's going to be a solution somewhere with robotics, with automation. And lo and behold, in the city that I love, I have family that live in Portland, David. And you're based in Portland, correct?
I'm actually an hour south of Portland.
Okay. Well, you're Oregon. You close enough.
Company started in Portland.
It's a drive, but you're definitely there. I am really, really pleased to introduce to everybody David Ashton, CEO of Canopy. And super excited to have you. You are an agricultural engineer turned entrepreneur. How did this happen?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for taking some time out to talk to us.
Yeah. Well, we're just joking that I need to go put on my 49ers hoodie to kind of combat some of the Seahawks attire in the background.
I've like debated since, I'm a lifelong Atlantan who I have take personal credit for helping the Seahawks win the Super Bowl because of my backdrop that I've had for 2 years. I take personal responsibility for it. Why are you with? I mean, you're in Oregon, so you really could go San Francisco or Seattle. Why is that from school?
I actually grew up in Sacramento.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and it's hard. I was a big Kings fan, but it's hard to cheer for the Kings.
Yeah. Well, listen, the Niners are a great team, and I'm sure you'll be back. And eventually, the backdrop will come down. But I thought, why not? I run the podcast out of my basement. I like this setup better than I have at my office. So, this is what I get. I have this old kind of Super Bowl gear and with layered in with a few new things. So you're an engineer, an agricultural engineer by training, by trade. You've spent, better part of a decade of kind of in this field. What was it? How is it that this idea of this automated greenhouse has come to life? I can't wait for everyone to kind of see this incredible. I think it's truly incredible. How did this come about, David?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I actually went to school at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and that's right near Salinas, where we grow most of our leafy greens. And driving up and down from Sacramento to Cal Poly, just going through all the acres and acres and acres of lettuce. And I was going to school during the historic drought. It was just wild to see all that being grown in essentially a desert and being shipped across the world. And so that always stuck in my mind. But after college, I went and I worked for a hop merchant, actually, and we designed a robot to trellises for the hop industry. I'm not sure if you've seen hops grow before, but every year they put a trellis wire that the hops grow up and they cut it down. So that's a very labor-intensive project. So right out of college, I built a team of 5, and we were successful in building that. And I was moving up to Portland to run that robot in the field, and the private investor that sponsored the project actually filed bankruptcy. So I ended up in Portland with no job, and I ended up working for a contract engineer, and as a contract engineer. And during that time, I worked for defense and consumer electronics. It was very interesting work, but my interests were always maintained in agriculture. And so at night, while my wife was going to medical school, I felt lazy. So I worked on this project, moonlit it at night for about 3 years, submitted a National Science Foundation grant. We got that grant. And now, almost 5 years later, we have a working full scale prototype and a team of 6.
That's fantastic. That's a great story. Well, that kind of answers one of the questions I had was, just how far along are you? Because as people are beginning to see now the photos and some of the videos of what this is a very sophisticated process that you've built. It's a greenhouse essentially, but it's unique, right? It's automated. It takes it from seed to harvest. I think the square footage of this thing is it's like 66 feet long, 37 wide. So that's like, for a greenhouse, that's huge, but it's also a big safe, what am I trying to say? It saves a lot of space. I mean, still you're producing what, 2 or 3 acres worth of food in this thing.
Yeah, definitely. So it's relatively small compared. Well, it's very small compared to a commercial greenhouse. It's a lot bigger than like a hobbyist greenhouse. Uh, we actually went vertical not to save space. We don't think that land is a big issue in the United States. We think that labor is a problem, and so we went vertical to actually bring plants to robots. And so that allows us to simplify the robots. One thing that's very difficult to achieve in agriculture is farm navigation, especially in an ever changing environment like a greenhouse. And so by bringing plants to our robots, we can simplify that automation to make it more effective and more cost effective.
Oh, I see. I see. Right. Instead of trying to bring the robots into all the different stages, you just bring them up into the robots where the robots can then perform whatever task needs to be at that time, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Like the underlying research for that we developed this farm on is what is the smallest possible farm we could build to justify the cost of end-to-end labor automation. And so everything we've done is hyper focused on cost.
Well, you've got this kind of your tagline here, grow more, labor less. So what are we talking about in terms of labor savings? What are the numbers kind of bearing out for the productivity? And I guess we should talk about productivity first before we get into labor, right? Because I've seen what you have on your website. So what's like in a fully scaled operational greenhouse, like how much can you produce?
Yeah, so we produces about 40,000 pounds of lettuce or leafy greens per year. That is about 300 to 400 heads of lettuce per day. And the
Wait,
novelty of the farm,
300 to 400 heads of lettuce a day.
yeah, so it's a continuous production. It's not a mass harvest.
Well, yeah, it makes sense. It's just it's ongoing. Okay.
Yeah, so I guess, but the novelty is not that it grows that much on a square foot. The novelty of the farm is that it grows 300 to 400 heads of lettuce per day, without any human interaction, but once every 2 weeks.
And what's every 2 weeks? What happens every 2 weeks?
The media magazine is reloaded, so like the soil magazine essentially. Seeds are replenished, filters are cleaned. Uh, yeah, I think one of the cool achievements that we've made in our greenhouse fertigation system is that there's no emitters and it's not pressurized, so we don't actually have that much clogging, which is a big labor intensive maintenance task as well.
So how much? Okay, so you're doing 300 to 400 heads of lettuce a day. That's staggering. I'm just thinking, like, how wide of an area could be serviced? And I know we're going to get into that because I can't help but think this way. And I know you've got a vision for this and where the food can be distributed. I know that's already in your mind, and we will get to that. So from a labor standpoint, like how much savings is there?
Yeah, it's hard to quantify
I
because
see.
because fuel production is so effective already. It's so efficient, and that's why we're growing things that field growers can't do well. So we're not really doing anything head lettuce, or anything we're doing is very novel petite varieties. So we ask ourselves, like, what is the benefit of our farm? And it's labor. So we're focusing on crops that are very labor intensive, and we're actually moving into focusing on petite Asian greens like kailan and bok choy, and the farm is organically certified as well, which is also exciting.
So that was the other thing I was thinking about was like how many varieties of plants can you grow in there at once? Are you trying to just keep it really focused to one or two, or can you do multiples?
Yeah, we're trying to avoid monocropping. So we're trying to create a more diverse range of crops. So cabbages, broccolis, in addition to salad, like novel salad mixes. But we are trying to diversify into as much as possible within the farm because the farm is designed to be flexible in what it can grow.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, because I mean, if you're just a single crop, then you're kind of limited in terms of your distribution and time of year and things of like that nature of when someone would want to buy that particular product.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
mentioned something on your website that I'd like you to kind of explain to people. You talked about the cold supply chain. What is the cold supply chain?
Yeah, the cold supply chain is essentially being like taking a product from field and into the consumer. So everything along that path. Uh, so the cold supply chain has been optimized for centralized production, which has been a necessary thing. But growing produce on site allows us to essentially completely bypass that cold supply chain. In our viewpoint, the cold supply chain, once you enter the cold supply chain, it's very difficult to control pricing, and whatever you grow in your farm essentially becomes a commodity. And so I think that's a big problem that we're seeing in commercial regional greenhouses. And so imagine a giant greenhouse that is right outside of a city. Oh, well, that greenhouse is producing so much in one area. It's still essentially centralized, and it's usually monocropped. And so that even that farm still requires distribution. And once you go into distribution, you kind of lose control of your pricing power. And so there's this kind of a paradox that we talk about where if you have a greenhouse, you need automation to increase margins, but to afford automation, you have to go to a large scale. If you go to a large scale, you require distribution. If you go to distribution, your product becomes commoditized, so your margin shrinks. And to increase margins, you have to implement automation. So it's just kind of this paradox that makes it very difficult for the EBITDA for even regional greenhouses in the United States to be profitable. Or yeah,
So
to be
what is it about the distribution? Why is distribution the problem or the necessary evil, I guess, in that big commercial footprint?
it's mostly because of the cost. I think right now growers are only getting about 30% of the retail price of a head of lettuce. So, and that's even at farm gate. So that's if the grower is packaging and the product is essentially ready to be picked up by a truck. And so 30% of that margin is going to the farmer currently, and it's difficult to compete on those margins. And so being
Right.
able to capture more of that and be able to address more high margin, low volume markets like restaurants or resort type places is I think necessary to be able to increase the overall revenue of greenhouse production.
Well, that's what I was thinking too. It's like, where do you envision this being sold to? I mean, I know you've got obviously there'll be retailers. You mentioned restaurants, so that's a type of food service. Where, like, ideally, one of these is in your city. Who do you envision that's being supplied this really, uber fresh food?
Yeah, I think for our first markets, we're focusing on more regional family-owned grocers. We're focusing on restaurants and even some direct-to-consumer um, outlets. And yeah, it's hard to compete again, like just in those high volume, low margin channels that are going to more established chain retailers. I think as we grow as a company though, and we scale and we're able to capture more niche markets, uh, some of those larger wholesalers will become more obtainable in terms of cost.
And too, you're also competing against large commercial farmers that they get subsidies from the government, and that also makes it really difficult. So they get, you know, they get subsidies, they get, regulations kind of, really skew in their favor. And now you're this, upstart trying to compete against the giant, the Goliath in the room. It's a pretty tall ask. So give us your vision. Where do you see this going?
Yeah, so right now we're looking at building our next farm. We have a spot selected. We haven't announced yet, but it's pretty much in the center of Portland. So that'll be our very next commercial farm that we want to demonstrate a 2 to 3 ROI on the equipment. But the ideal spots that we're looking at are places that have around 40,000 people, kind of rural, thinking of places like Bend, places like Astoria, Hood River, McMinnville. Those kind of locations make a lot of sense for us to place these farms, because those are places that it's difficult for distribution to get to, and it's usually more expensive because of the supply chain. It's hard to get to Astoria, right?
I see. So you mentioned when a product goes into distribution, you're kind of opening a number of problems, which include cost. So what's the alternative when you've got the greenhouse, let's say out in Bend, Oregon, a beautiful area, by the way. That's where my family just recently relocated to that area. It's absolutely
Yeah, the sun is good there.
yeah, it is. Um, so how does the food get distributed? Because obviously it does have to move from the greenhouse into your, the end customer. But you talked about kind of eliminating distribution. So kind of explain that kind of confusing statement to the average person.
Yeah, so we would essentially imagine, let's take a brewery, for example. So a brewery, we could co-locate our farm on site with the brewery. It's like in the parking lot. I use a brewery, for example, because we're exploring ideas of industrial symbiosis. So imagine all the CO2 that comes from the fermentation process of a brewery, we can pump that into a greenhouse. And so all the product grown in the greenhouse can supply that brewery's restaurant as like an anchor tenant to some extent, or it's uh, like a baseline offtake, and then the rest of the product can be distributed throughout throughout the city by bike, or by just without requiring a third party to
Right.
distribute that.
You don't need
And
a food, just you don't need the food distributors to come in. You can just find local distribution, local means and methods of getting the food out.
yeah, or if there's a customer that just needs that much produce, like we're talking to a handful of Native American tribes that their casinos require a significant amount of produce, and our farm produces all the needs of those casinos. So if we built one right there on site, there would be no distribution. We'd be carrying the product across the parking lot into the casino or into the community.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, to me, when I think of this greenhouse and how much, it can produce, to me it just would seem like it's again common sense. I'm in Georgia, and then we've got Kroger, we have Publix. Those are the big ones. In Florida, Publix is the big one. So they have their distribution centers. It just seems to me like, why not just put one of these in your parking lot? Put it out back, and now you've got X number of heads of fresh food, you just constantly rolling it out, and you could totally revamp your natural section of your grocery stores, particularly companies that are trying to market themselves that way, right? Like a Whole Foods. There's others, so maybe that's a long-term play for you.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the reasons why we automated so much, is because those grocers don't want to be farmers at all. And so we needed to automate everything from seed to harvest to make that more appealing to those supermarkets. But that being said, too, the larger chain grocery stores like Whole Foods, they will not allow store deliveries. And so even if we built one like right near the store, we'd have to ship that produce back to distribution. The distribution would bring it back to the
Mhm.
store. From a logistics standpoint, that's kind of how ingrained our supply chain is.
Yeah.
But more local grocers, family-owned grocers, are happy and willing to receive product to the store.
Yeah, that's you're. It's one of those, you can't believe the amount of red tape. You got this great problem that you're solving, and yet they're adding into this. You got to fit into their old style.
Yeah, no
Um,
paradigm shifts at all, really.
yeah. Well, you're going to force it. I mean, this is going to force it. I mean, you're trying to break the system. This is the classic disruptor, which I love. I love meeting a disruptor. I think that's fantastic. Tell us a little bit about just how the greenhouse works, because they're going to be seeing right now, again, more video, some more photos. Kind of walk us through, how the greenhouse is actually working.
Yeah, so the greenhouse is a standard design. We want to be able to mass produce them like cars, and they're all built in the United States as well. We're actually on site with our manufacturer, but the greenhouse is a set 2,500 square feet. People go in every 2 weeks. They load up a media magazine. You'll see in the video, but you essentially load it with 2 weeks worth of soil, That soil, it sits in that magazine until it's ready to be seeded. So when it's ready to be seeded, it drops the tray down. It's hydrated. All the soil is actually um, dehydrated, so we have to rehydrate it. After that, we seed. And then it moves into a nursery. In that nursery, it spends about 10 days going from a seed to a sprout. After that, we use computer vision to identify which seeds have actually are viable. So non-viable seeds we leave in the tray and they can be discarded. But from there, we transplant. So we have one robot that is very inexpensive. It's around like $15,000 and does all the transplanting in the entire farm. From there, plants sit in a carousel and they receive natural sunlight. I think one strong part about our farm is that it is vertical, but it also uses natural sunlight as a main source of energy. I think a lot of vertical farms rely on artificial lighting, which drives up a production cost. But they sit in these carousels, they rotate throughout the day. In about 28 days from transplant, we harvest with a robot. The robot picks up a cup and moves it over in a plant, and it cuts the plant from the cup. And a big aspect of having a farm autonomous for 2 weeks at a time is self-cleaning. So the cup is actually cleaned, sterilized, and put back in its original position. And so our farm, all this research was actually part of the National Science Foundation Environmental Technologies cohort. And so our farm uses one spigot, uses 100 amps, 240 volts. There's no one-time use plastic in production. It's organically certified, a closed loop watering system that's organically certified. And the whole farm runs off of one air compressor essentially for automation. And so it's very minimal usage, and it can be installed in someone's backyard. That's how minimal the resource usage is.
Yeah, that was incredible. I was like, one spigot? Like I could just, if I wanted to become this entrepreneur in the future and just supply, my town with all the fresh food, I could just, make that investment, put it in my yard, assuming I get I can get through the city to do that. To me, again, it's one of these brilliant common sense inventions that it's been a long time coming, I think, and you've got a lot of competition in this space. So I think, what you're doing kind of clever is the sizing of it, the aspect of bringing the food, bringing the plant to the robot, and the footprint is such that it's, to me, I don't know, there's something about the size of it. It just feels like you could really just put it anywhere. You're not doing like a football field, which I've seen. I've seen those. That's just too big.
Yeah, I feel like we are the only company that's really focusing on industrial automation on a local scale. So there's companies like container farms where you can place those anywhere, doing a lot of the similar marketing things that I'm mentioning. But the labor costs are extremely high, and the cost of production is higher than anything else because you're growing product in a building or container that's not designed to grow produce. So being able to grow produce in a farm that's fully automated and addressing labor costs, I think we're the first ones to do that I'm aware of. And in the future, we plan to franchise these farms, or our goal is to franchise these farms. So much like you were saying, anyone can become a farmer. I think the average farmer is what 60 years old right now, and the joke is that every
Oh
year
my God.
that number goes up. And so we would imagine a new generation of farmers that you can become a franchise of this. You want to supply for your community and contribute in a really meaningful way. That's like the old end goal vision for Canopy.
I love that too, because I could see, the younger generation, they see this as well, it checks a lot of boxes. I mean, for one, it kind of connects with your heart. There's something about when you grow food, there's something that's very almost spiritual about it. There's something really unique, when you grow something from the earth. It's growing from soil. So I mean, although it's inside, it is soil based. And
Or just supporting your community, I think, in a meaningful way is, I think everyone kind of wants
exactly.
that.
Well, exactly. And then of course that enables you then to you could work with your local schools, you can work with your local municipalities, you could become that, you're the entrepreneur that's gotten the approval from the city, and you're supplying everyone with what they need. I think it's a
And
brilliant
then
idea.
also going back to what initially said, like focusing on niche crops. So like someone that says, okay, there's a huge demand in my region, even if it's in a city, or Asian vegetables or living nursery stock, like they could address those markets and not just focusing on lettuce.
Yeah, you could do, like you said, the bok choy or something. Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
look, I moved out to Cartersville, but I came from Alpharetta, Johns Creek, and that's to your point. I mean, there's been a very large that's become like an IT hub, and IT that's attracted a lot of Indians. You go over into Duluth, there's a lot of Asians, so you've got a lot of other cultural type of foods that are being supported by grocery stores. So you can instantly just kind of tap into that, to your marketplace. I think it's a great idea. Now you talked about your long-term goal is to make this like a franchise. So as people are now watching and kind of seeing how this thing operates, like I am not the most mechanically inclined person. So when I see all the moving parts, part of me feels like, how am I going to, I could, the 2 week cycle of, like replenishing, that sounds pretty straightforward, but what about the repair? What about the actual maintenance? How do you envision supporting your franchises with that kind of support?
yeah. So we would offer a maintenance package, and that's how we would make like some recurring revenue as a company in addition to their franchise fee. And so we're focusing on the Pacific Northwest first. So we have kind of a spoke and wheel model where
Yeah.
we can service all those farms. So we're not building these all over the place. We're really focusing on Oregon, Washington, and Utah here for the first.
Yeah. Your first phase, your first iteration. Yeah. You got to
Yeah,
prove it out, Yeah.
yeah,
That makes sense.
exactly.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
makes sense. I guess, we've covered a lot of ground here in a pretty short period of time. I guess to me, it's okay. What are the obstacles? Now that you've been in this, you've got your pilot, it's up and running. You've proved it. What are the obstacles at this point?
Yeah, I mean, the obstacle is always fundraising, right? So we're building food
Cash.
infrastructure. Yeah, food infrastructure it takes time, is very vital, but it takes time to grow. um, but I think fundraising. We're considering doing a crowdfund. I think it fits well for a crowdfund, but we're not really sure quite yet. For to finance our first farm, like right now, we need to build our first commercial farm to be able to
Yeah.
get debt financing to actually finance the equipment. But until we can do that, we're considering options of fundraising, different options of fundraising. But I think one of the big things is that the United States is good at producing calories. We're not good at producing nutrients. That's why we've mechanized things like corn, soy, wheat, and those are there's a lot of, and like you mentioned, subsidies. It's very difficult to compete on price. Food is way too cheap in the United States.
Don't get into corn, for God's sakes. You'll never win. You'll never win that one.
Yeah, but all these things are so cheap because of mechanization. So we're hoping with more mechanization, especially crops like fruits and vegetables, we can make make more variety and make it a little more affordable too.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's funny. I was thinking from a business standpoint, what are your obstacles? But before you get into all the business challenges, you just have the very first obstacle, and that is, how do you start building these out at scale and keep the costs down? So that's your first big obstacle. But you've already you proved the model, so you just have to go out and talk to more people. There's a lot of companies, big Fortune 500, 1,000 company that, they have a division, they get into this ag tech, and they're looking for young upstart, companies and ideas. Just don't go on Shark Tank, because I don't think Mr. Wonderful would cut you the deal you want, Those guys take too big a chunk.
Yeah, we've maintained capital efficiency. We've done all this with 6 people, which we're pretty proud of. And I think a lot of investors realize that we've come a long way with just 6 people. So
that's right.
Yeah.
That's great. Listen, I can't wait to follow this story. I can't wait to have you back on. My wife heard that we were talking today. She said she wants samples. I said, you want him to send lettuce across the country? I said that violates his first principle. He's not going to send lettuce across country. So we'll have to have you back on to do an update to see, how the Pacific Northwest is opening up. David, great to meet you. So excited to introduce everybody to Canopy. We wish you all the all the much success in the world to get this thing up and running to the scale you want it.
Thank you for having me. This is one of the first podcasts I've done, so appreciate it.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I'm so gracious, even to 49er fans.
Yeah, you're in a gracious season, so I
mean, it's really easy for me to be gracious in a Super Bowl winning year. All right, David, we'll catch you again real soon, my friend.
All right, thank you.